Hi all, I'd like to show you an absolutely amazing game today, played between Efim against Vasily Smyslov. Just to introduce the players, Efim, Petrovich was his middle name, was a Soviet chess player and world-class grandmaster at his peak. He won the Soviet championship twice in 1955 and 1979, and was a candidate for the world championship on 6 occasions: 1953, 56, 62, 65, 68 and 71. He also won 4 Ukrainian championship titles in 1950, 1957, 1958 and 1959, and shared first in the 1991 World Seniors Championship, winning the title outright in 1992. He was also a coach to world champions Boris Spassky and Anatoly Karpov, and also an author. So a fantastic player in his own right, playing with the white pieces. Playing black was a former world champion Vasily Smyslov. Smyslov was a Soviet and Russian grandmaster and was world champion from 1957 to 1958. So that's about 7 years before this game. He was a candidate for the world championship on 8 occasions: 48, 50, 53, 56, 59, 65, for which this was a candidate's final match, by the way, this particular game against Geller, 1983 and 1985. He twice tied first at the Soviet Championships in 1949 and 55. A total of 17 Chess Olympiad medals. One is an all-time record. In 5 European team championships, Smyslov won 10 gold medals. He remained active and successful in competitive chess well into the 1960s and 70s, qualifying for the finals of the World Championship candidate matches as late as 1983. Okay, let's have a look at this game. Geller, with white, played d4. Smyslov played knight f6. And we saw now c4, g6. After knight c3, black declares the opening as the Grunfeld defense, this quick d5. A hyper-modern opening aiming to encourage white to construct a centre, to destroy it later on. It became a favourite of Garry Kasparov later when he battled against Anatoly Karpov. The main line move now was played. C takes d5. Knight takes d5, e4. Black takes on c3, takes bishop g7. All of black's moves hit the d4 square coming up. c5 and knight c6, the usual follow-up. Bishop c4 was played here. This is a very common move, and black strikes at the centre. So if knight f3 now, then bishop g4 could be an annoying pin. For that reason, if we have a look at this, actually maybe even just reserving the pin, because here I'm not sure it's entirely that good. It falls actually into, can you spot if bishop g4 is played here? If I give you 5 seconds. Okay, actually bishop takes f7 here would be pretty bad. No, black usually castles, and still the knight here is prone to be pinned, so it should be a comfortable game for black with that pin, a more comfortable game than usual. But yeah, white actually avoids the pin implication altogether. Knight e2, so still protecting the d4 pawn, but the ability to play f3 is useful for bishop g4. Black now castled, white castled, now knight c6. So you see, black's strategy is geared up for central pressure on d4. White supports it now, the d4 pawn with bishop e3. This is the most common move. Very theoretical position. And yet bishop g4 is played regardless of f3. This has been very common in the Karpov-Kasparov matches. Well, Kasparov playing white. For example, bishop g4, this variation occurred quite a lot. With here, this knight a5, bishop takes f7, very popular in Karpov versus Kasparov games. There's actually 243 games from this position, so there's a very heavily trodden variation here. But yeah, in the game, we see actually the main alternative move, which is Queen C7. So 680 games for Queen C7, and there's about 950 for Bishop G4. Now with this move, a routine move like Rook B1, the bishop's a little bit on the loose side. It is actually a loose piece, and black, in theory, could actually try and exploit that bishop with this, with knight takes D4 here. So having a pawn, but white has bishop takes F7 check. This position here, white's lost the light square bishop, but still it might be a small advantage for white here. After knight b5, there's still pressure here, even though black's got the bishop pair. But a more cautious move with the bishop, that loose piece on c4, is played. Not just defensive though, rook c1 is potentially embarrassing that queen in some variations as well. So rook c1. So on c takes, we're protecting that bishop. Black increases the pressure on d4. And now in this position, the most common move is actually bishop f4, 272 games. Queen d2, 148. Queen a4 has been played 23 times. But this move f4 looks fairly logical, but it's only 22 games. And you may be wondering why. There's some interesting implications here. Of course, black's moves are all geared up for the d4 pawn. And you might think, hold on a moment, this looks a bit caveman. Okay, it's going for f5, it's going to trying to coordinate this rook and the bishop on f7. But surely black can actually pin the knight here. And this is very interesting. e6 was actually played in the game. Maybe black was fearing something behind the scenes here. If we look at this position, it looks as though white should be falling to bits here, surely, because of d4. A casual move should just lead to equality. Say white plays casually to queen e1. Then black could actually take on e2, and then take on d4. And now play the tactical knight takes d4, hitting the queen, so there's no time to punish black's queen. And this position, from an engine perspective, is actually equal. It's a very interesting position. Maybe the engine assesses it as slightly as dynamic compensation for the pawn. White has the bishop pair. It's fascinating, but yeah, it's interesting that bishop g4 there seems to give potentially equality. Another possibility is f5 here, which is a bit audacious, as though white's just going to go for the f7 pressure. Very interesting variation starting with c takes here. In this position, can you guess what white could play for an advantage? It looks as though the whole of black's strategy was the d4 pawn. Dynamics come into the equation because white has bishop takes f7. If king takes, this is bad for black. Queen b3, check. And if, say, king f8, leaving the king on that f file, it's very dangerous. This is discovered check, and it's also threatening mate. So black really doesn't want to do something like that. Black wants to step away from the f file here. So say king e8. This position, it looks dangerous for things like queen g8 check. Apparently knight takes d4 is quite strong. So we've got an idea of knight e6 here. And we're using the rook against the queen, you see. If knight takes, we're always hitting the queen. So that's embarrassing for that. Black would be in trouble here if bishop takes, c takes. And any knight takes d4, there's always queen g8 first, and then we can win the queen with check here. So this just shows actually there's something about this move f4, f5. It's a little bit on the cheeky side, but it's very, very dangerous for black to go to d4 here. Black's best here would be to sidestep this, and in this position it's still okay for white. C takes d4, we've got the pin against the queen here. Bishop takes though is terrible because we've got that pin. bishop takes, for example, pardon me, because now we play bishop takes and we just play queen takes, for example, just using the pin. So here, you know, this position is good for white, it seems. White can play, for example, like this. If the pawn's taken here, then bishop d5. Very tactical scenarios, but ultimately white will be slightly better in the resulting scenarios here. Okay, it's opposite coloured bishops, but yeah, white's doing okay. Now, this does represent one of black's major alternatives here to f4, though, to play bishop g4. It really does. Possibly, I mean, if not f5 or queen e1, these are the two major possibilities, really. So that's something to be borne in mind. So black's 12th move is a little bit on the defensive side, just trying to blunt this bishop and really ask, is white really serious for going for f5 even in this position? Well, okay, here let's examine this. In the game, king h1 is played, which looks like some prophylaxis on this diagonal, because moving the f-pawn has weakened this diagonal, which is often fatal in chess, really, these diagonals against the king. So let's have a quick look. If f5 immediately, e takes. Now if takes here, just bishop takes, there's nothing too clever here about the exchange sack. It seems d4 is under great pressure. So yeah, more cautiously, king h1 was played. And black now doesn't want to resolve the tension. He'll be going into potential dangers with his queen. He actually plays b6. If white plays a routine move, seemingly, you know, gaining space, e5, then the light squares are all kind of weakened. Black can consider bishop b7 and then later knight a5 and have a fantastic light square grip coming up. No, that's not white's intention. He plays now f5 here, and you might consider, well, isn't black restraining that for the same reasons we just looked at? Let's have a look. If e takes, now e takes here is not particularly good, actually. Yes, that is not particularly good. Better is bishop g5. Bishop g5, hitting the rook. What does black do here? Say for sake of argument, rook e8, then e takes, bishop takes. This is slightly more powerful, with less pressure on d4. So there's some attacking prospects here in sight for white. Queen b3, we can see f7 is being embarrassed. So it's a little bit on the dangerous side, even if it's not immediately apparent. So black played the more cautious knight a5, trying to kick this bishop from this sensitive diagonal. Now we see bishop d3, which indirectly supports f5 against that bishop. Black takes here, and we have e takes, but in full support now with this bishop and rook. Bishop b7, which looks menacingly at white's king with that g2. So perhaps one day queen c6 is going to be useful for black, for example. But there's also a loose piece issue on e3. And in fact, black also has a forcing move here, c4, which would loosen e2. So if white's not careful here, there could be a way of losing a piece with pressure on e3, which would gain a tempo, followed by c4. As an example, let's try and show that as an example. If h3, this starts to look potentially dangerous here. If queen here, for example, c4, and you see this is now slightly looser. If that bishop goes back, whack, and with just one material. So white's got to be cautious for this possibility, as well as his g2 is not without tactical weaknesses, either king safety weaknesses or actual pieces being loose in this position. So it plays a bit of a prophylaxis move, not just against pressure on the e file and c4, but also it's a battery for bishop h6 to weaken black's king. Dual purpose. Queen d2. Now black plays rook e8, so it looks as though the pressure is mounting for both these possibilities of putting pressure on the e file or queen c6. A very cautious move now is played knight g3. Yes, again, if a move like h3, for sake of argument, c4 is winning for black, we have this position here. It's embarrassing. Embarrassing the material there. White's going to lose the knight on e2. So, here we have knight g3. So, able to address c4 here, the bishop can just slip back if needed to c2. So, that's not even played. Black wants to keep the tension in the centre, even though he's moved his rook away from the d4 pawn. Black now plays queen c6, and it does carry an idea that rook takes e3 for mating on g2. Queen's a bit overloaded. So, for example, h3, just to show that, rook takes e3, queen takes g2, checkmate. So white plays now rook f2. So now, safeguarding g2 is actually also free for bishop h6 as an idea now. If we can take this bishop, play f6, and then the queen can come to h6, it's mate time. Black played now rook a d8. So both rooks look very pretty. Black's position here looks very, very pretty and hypermodern indeed. You see the double fianchetto, the rooks beautifully in the centre. What could possibly go wrong here? Both bishops looking absolutely stunning. We can have an artistic appreciation of black's position, but in chess there's the king's safeties to take account here. It's not just all about looking pretty, although white's bishops look silly compared to black's bishops. White, with his e3 bishop in particular, is trying to dent black's king safety, and with this now knight h5 is also a move to bear in mind here in the variations. Very dangerous, this position. Let's see some of the dangers. If bishop takes, queen takes, and white is threatening things like f6 to mate on g7, or even knight h5, this position is very dicey for black, to say the least. Say rook d7 as an example, f6, and black would have to give up the queen because queen g7. Let's have another go. Say queen d6. In this position, f6, there's queen f8, but knight h5 threatens mate. And if queen f8 here, we play knight f6 and a mate on h7. After knight h5, this is much more dangerous. It's actually opening up this diagonal, making f6 even more effective. Like this. We've got this. So if queen f8, we play queen takes h7, checkmate. So in fact, it's almost as if there's only one or two moves here that would be palatable for black in this particular position, but no, white's got a massive advantage. Even with rook d6, the engine choice takes knight h5 here, winning material, threatening mate there. Check. 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 d5, interrupting the queen from the rook. This is very good. If queen d6, which is not just winning material, it's damaging black's king considerably. Bishop takes f7, and this is diabolical for black. If taking here, check, and the loose rook on e8, even better, rook e1, very strong, it's a forced mate. So black needs to be exceptionally careful in this position here, with looming bishop takes g7, knight h5, and f6 threats. Black plays bishop h8, which might be one of the best defensive moves available in the position. White now plays queen f4. So another battery has emerged. The rook and queen here on f7. And there's the rooks, although they are pretty, they're not helping black's king in respect, in particular to f7. White is actually threatening fg, and queen takes f7. Now here, one of the rooks takes time to defend f7. Possibly that's one of the best defensive moves available, in fact. If we'd used this rook instead, white has in this position a strong bishop g5. And on f6, white could even consider this. It's a very, very dangerous position indeed. If takes here, takes, this is extremely dangerous. It's a forced mate. This position here. Queen takes d8. There's loose pieces to collect as well with double attacks. It's actually forcing a checkmate. So black chooses the right rook to defend f7 with rook d7. White now plays a powerful attacking move, knight e4. With knight e4, white is going to play at some point taking, and a knight g5 will be very dangerous. Black plays now c4. It's also tying down black quite a bit. The d6 might be of interest. For example, here, if rook e7, well, let's have a look. Fg. If takes here, we can mate black with queen f8, showing the power of the battery. And if hg, the knight d6 can be used. Knight d6. It's horrible. So f7 is dropping off. We just take f7. So knight e4 is a very powerful move, almost causing a paralysis. The rooks can't double against e4 that easily. So what does black actually do? Right, he tried c4 here. He's released the central tension on d4. It makes d4 more solid to play this. So before we play that move, that was actually played, just from a theoretical angle. What if we played c takes d4 here? Then here c takes and we're hitting the queen. Say queen d5. White can play rook e2 now, threatening knight f6 check. This is nice for white. For example, taking. If taking with the h-pawn, knight f6 is mating, it's either winning the queen or mating here. This is horrible. Queen takes d4 doesn't help. Rook takes e8, and then we're winning the queen. Or mating on h8 with the rook. If king h7, rook h8, checkmate. So yes, there's limited defences here, and it seems a major strategic concession. But that plays it now. c4. Bishop drops back here. I think b1 is also possible here. This would be okay as well. But bishop c2, rook d7. A very interesting position. So what's the idea here? Well, knight d6 now might run into a back row issue. Let's check this. Rook e1 check, and white is the one getting done over. In fact, ouch. So white now plays a staggering move. I think he will be in trouble. Potentially, it looks as though he might even be in trouble with rook e1. But no, I think this is okay for white as well. But he played a move which is even stronger, technically, than rook e1. Can you guess what white played here? And it looks, again, it looks elegant that all the black pieces are on the e4 knight. The elegance, though, is outweighed by king safety issues quite often. I think this game is a remarkable example of that. So on move 24, can you guess what white played? If I give you 5 seconds to pause the video, starting from now. Okay, white casually played rook c f1. Outrageous, ignoring black's e4 pressure. Black is in a serious state here, and we're about to find out why. Rook takes e4 was played. This leads to a massive advantage for white, but before we look at that, if queen c7, with the back row a bit securer, knight d6 is possible here, hitting the rook. If the rook moves, say like this is really dangerous. If f takes we mate with queen f8, so there's always have to play hg all the time here. But again, f7's weak, knight takes f7. The tripling on f7 is nasty. Black's falling to bits there. So, black eliminated this knight. Guess what white played in this position. If I give you 5 seconds to pause the video here, starting from now. Okay, white played f takes g6, offering his queen. Wow. Now, the best move might actually be queen takes g6, ignoring the queen. Or f6 as played, but it's already pretty critical. If the queen is taken here, it's not a real sacrifice here because it's a sham sacrifice. G takes h7 is actually checkmate. Ouch. It's quite nice how the bishops are coordinating though against black's king and that pawn. So can't be taken. So black plays f6. Guess what white plays here, and the engines love this move as the absolute top move. If I give you 5 seconds to pause the video here. Okay, white plays now queen g5. Unbelievable move. Queen g5. Lots of threats here. G takes, g7, trapping the bishop if it's really... the queen is immune again. Before we look at that, also, I mean, queen g3 is also simple and strong for white. This is just, this is actually technically better though, g5. Here, I think black's getting done over anyway. G takes, and the move rook f4. I think this will secure an advantage for white with rook h4. It's very dangerous for black's king. But let's go into the game continuation, which is spectacular. If f takes here, rook f8, and we mate black. So the queen is immune, not a real sacrifice. So black plays now queen d7. Might be one of the better defensive moves available. Now white could have actually taken on h7 here. Apparently this is okay. White takes time in the midst of this position just to move his king to g1. Still a big advantage for white, but white could have actually gone for it here with rook takes f6. This is strong. Takes, threatening queen f8. What does black do? If takes here, takes. In this position, queen h5, we've got an eye on both rooks now, and white's threatening bishop g5. It's very, very serious threats here. For example, like this. Bishop f8, this would require very precise calculation, but this position, with that huge pin there, this white can just play this next. It's a very, very dangerous, difficult position. Continuation could go something like this with bishop takes e4 at the right time. But yeah, and with e8 loose in these variations now. But yeah, interesting stuff. But white now played king g1 in the midst of this, seeing what black can do, testing the state of play. What does black actually do here? Is he going to block his own bishop in if he retreats the knight? He's faced with seemingly a lot of major threats here. Also, it's tempting to consider rook g4, surely. Black played bishop g7. If rook g4, this doesn't help. G takes, strong here. Taking here, it's crashing through. It's actually a force mate in 11 there. So, bishop g7 is played. And now, fantastic sacrifice here. 5 seconds. What would you play here with white? So you're a piece down, but it's only that extra knight on the rim. Black's king safety is compromised. How would you further compromise black's king, safety. 5 seconds from now. Okay, rook takes f6. So white is now threatening rook f7, that's one of the principal threats. Or taking first on e4 and then rook f7. Any rook e1 here doesn't really help. Rook f7 is still strong. Taking here we can take with the king without much penalty. If rook it here, g takes, this is painful for black. This kind of scenario doesn't help. Okay, so rook takes f6. Black played here rook g4. Possibly in the lost position, bishop takes f6 was strongest. Say bishop takes, queen takes, threatening queen f8, mating. Takes here. This is bad for black. For tactical reasons, similar to noted before, that we have this loose rook possibility being exploited. And if here, then bishop e5 check is a mate in 3. Check, check, mate. So yes, some very difficult possibilities here for black to consider. But yeah, he ends up playing. So instead of bishop takes f6 or rook e1, he ends up playing rook g4. White now plays a very strong forcing move in this position. I'll give you plus 1,000 points if you get it right, and minus 1,000 points if you get it wrong. So no pressure. What would you play here if I give you 5 seconds to pause the video and think about it? Okay, now if you said queen takes g4, you've just blown away the game. Black plays queen takes g4 here, threatening mate. Takes here. This is okay for black here. There's nothing going on here. Ouch. You've just blown it. Rook g6 we have here for black. Bishop takes d4. And black is doing okay now. Bishop d5 or bishop e4. These are strong moves. There's nothing for white there. Off the check here we can, well, there's nothing for white. No, we have to take on h7 first. Now the king is on at h8. What to play here? I'll show you the next move. Bishop takes g7. So forcing queen takes g7. Now what does white play? It looks as though black's tripled on g2. It's a famous Marshall game a bit like this, where seemingly there was this pressure around Marshall's king, but he did something clever. So what does white do here to make this backfire for black, this particular position? If I give you 5 seconds here, white to play, and the final move of the game at move 31. So 5 seconds starting from now. Okay, white plays queen takes g4. Queen sack, the third queen sack. Again, the sham queen sack is clear cut, really. It's not a speculative one, it's absolutely based on calculation. Black resigned. If queen takes g4, check. If the king moves, we queen our pawn. Wow. Checkmate. Bishop's covering g6. Doesn't matter if the rook takes. The queening of the pawn is checkmate. That's the end of black's chips here, basically. If bishop d5, white can force still her mate with taking, and it's a mate in 8 apparently. Rook 1 to f4. So coming in with this one, so say, let's say for sake of argument a6 for a forced mate in 4, we can queen here, check, check, and we roll over with the rooks. Lawnmower chatmate. Oh dear. What a game. So there were 3 queen sacks in them. All calculated, no risk, queen sacrifices. But it just shows the dynamics of the F file. Throughout this game, the dynamics of the F file and the F7 point balanced out the central pressure on D4. A fascinating game. I hope you got something from it. Comments or questions on YouTube. Thanks very much.